Remember the last time you played a tabletop RPG and your friend cast a fireball spell, killing all the enemies and exploding your whole adventuring party? I know they say that living well is the best revenge. Well, how about you play as a living fireball spell and let revenge be the best revenge with Battlezoo Ancestry's Year of Titans. Once a month for the next year, you'll receive a unique playable species you won't find anywhere else for your D&D 5th Edition or Pathfinder 2e games. Now you can play as a living spell, a skillful cyclops, a wicked troll, or even a mighty kraken. And those are just the ones I can pronounce. An hair jar?
It's pronounced ein hairyar.
Say tires?
It's satyrs.
Okay, I think I got this one. Dual hand.
Doulahan. It's a headless horseman from Irish folklore, you gigantic tit.
Every month you'll receive a new PDF or Foundry VTT module, along with handmade battle maps, tokens for your virtual tabletop, both static and animated, and detailed in-world lore entries, allowing you to easily add these unique species to your next tabletop session. All this and more for less than a monthly Egg McMuffin. Delicious. Head on over to the link in the description to learn more, because if you sign up for the Kickstarter, you'll get a bonus species a year early, the Mighty Titan. That's 13 unique species throughout 2025 to amaze your friends and family. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have to call my dungeon master and tell them that I'm going to be playing as Godzilla from now on. Godzilla.
Well, we'll see. I'm working. Are you guys working?
I don't know.
Oh, you are.
we?
You are working.
Okay.
So there you
They
go.
can hear us.
Everyone can
It's
hear
a roll
everyone.
for combat miracle.
It is a miracle. I don't know if it's a miracle. Let's see. Are we live?
Yeah, we're live. I see us saying that.
Oh, okay. My Chrome crashed, of course. So
I
anyhow,
can't even hear myself. It's a surprise.
it is a surprise. But we got Bob Worldbuilder, who the last time you were here is to talk about Daggerheart and your experience at PAX. So we're
It's their
groundhog.
anniversary stream. Yeah.
We're groundhogging it. We're groundhog
our
day.
Daggerheart correspondent, Bob
Yes.
Worldbuilder.
That's what you've turned into. That's all you've turned into, a Daggerheart correspondent. So nothing more.
Aw.
I'm kidding. We actually had a very good time because, see, last time I wanted Bob on the show because this was your very first real convention, I believe. So we wanted to hear the whole
pretty much.
Yeah, hear the full experience. Now he's a vet. He's been to PAX, he's been to Gen Con. So when he showed up, him and Grace World Builder, Grace World Builder.
Right.
He was like grizzled, an old veteran.
Yeah. I mean, once you go to like 2 conventions and hang out with you and Professor, it's like you kind of got it. You know what to do. So
That's true. We did hang out quite a bit, actually. So
yeah.
and we had dinner together. 2 of the 3 nights we had dinner together.
Yeah. Yeah.
You actually got the real experience because we went to Chinatown. That was actually really good. That food, that Chinese
That
restaurant.
was great. Yeah. For listeners, we were there with Paladin Pros, who also has a YouTube channel, and I guess he used to work at this restaurant in Philly because he grew up in that area. And we were like a party of 7, like rolled in there, sat at a giant table, and we all got to joke that the table had Professor's universal dungeon terrain on it, or ultimate dungeon terrain, because it had this giant lazy Susan that we were, spinning our plates around. But it was a great time.
Yeah, it was. It was
Oh,
hard.
man, if it was actually his universal terrain, it might have had like section in the middle that doesn't spin,
Right.
or that spins separately, so that it's like, no, I want to keep this middle part near me, but we'll spin the outside
Yeah.
of the lazy Susan around the table.
This food is in melee range. This food is in.
Yeah.
You got to move. Yeah.
Exactly.
It was pretty crazy. So that was fun. Well, that was fun because that place was hardcore, and you knew it was hardcore when you saw on the menu. Of course, you had your regular dishes, but then you had like baby octopus,
we had jellyfish
with jellyfish, and like pig intestine, and it was like
Frog.
a lot of frogs.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was. It was hardcore.
I was to say, and to all our collective surprise, I think, because we weren't sure if it's like legit or not, but they even had like shark fin soup or something on there. It's like, I don't know if that's. Can you still do that? I don't know how it works. But
no. I had shark fin soup once. I mean, it's supposedly highly illegal. So, but it's cartilage, so it's very easy to fake. So
okay,
that's the thing. I had it once, like at a Chinese banquet wedding, and it was like 25 years ago. It was a long time ago. So, but yeah. So, well, we are back, and I think Mark is going to be a little left out because Mark didn't go to PAX. But I will ask because everyone kept asking me, "Where's Mark? Mark, where's Mark?"
I'm here.
Yeah, I know, but are you going to go to Gen Con?
I want to go next year. I'm going to go to Gen Con. There's not going to be a wedding during that time.
Okay.
And then maybe I'll go to PAX Unplugged too.
Mm-hmm. And we got a whole bunch of people from Page as well in the chat, I see. So the next place Bob and I will be, and Professor, and like there's literally, and Kelsey Dion, and just about everyone is going to be at the Philadelphia Area Gaming Expo Page, which is in 5 weeks.
It's so soon already. It feels like.
It's very relaxed, though. That's the most relaxed committee. Well, there's 60 game creators going to this, and I think there's only like 1,000 people tickets. So 6% of the convention will be game creators and YouTubers. So it's gonna be that's gonna be crazy. Last year was pretty crazy, and there was only like 10 of us, but everyone's going. I mean, they just announced Kelsey Dion after bugging her to go, but I guess she finally decided that her Kickstarter wasn't as important as going to a convention. So,
do we know when her next Kickstarter is?
I know all about it.
Spring, right?
Yeah. Okay. Well, she's it's in the winter, spring.
I don't know what's revealed yet. So
she's doing one that I know, and she was going to be working on it, and she didn't want to go because she thought she'd be too busy. Because I kept saying you should go, and she's like, I'll be too busy, too busy, and then she's going. So I think she realized she's like everyone's going to be there.
Yeah, and we're all busy too.
And we're all busy. And more importantly, she used to live in New York. Oh, and Runehammer's here, and her and Runehammer. So Runehammer doesn't go to conventions ever. Like he never goes anywhere.
Yeah.
But he will be going to Page. So, and her and Runehammer are extremely good friends. So I think it's an opportunity for her to see him and meet other people. Because a few other people don't go to Gen Con. The Lazy GM, I don't think does he go to Gen Con?
I was about to say, I'm sure he's gone to a ton in the past, but I have never met in person Mike Shea yet. We've chatted online off and on for years, but
I've never met him.
First time I'm meeting him.
I've never met him either. And I've met everyone. I've not met him. Well, you have to go to a convention. That's part of it. If you don't go to a convention, I won't meet you. So that's a big part of it. I don't think he goes. Supposedly the big rumor is that he's extremely tall. So when you see him, you'll be surprised.
I feel like that's true about half the creators I've met, honestly. Like Alan, the dungeon coach, I did not realize he was like over 6 feet.
Oh, he's huge.
I've heard, though I haven't actually met him, that Terran in Destructo Boy is also gigantic. Like over 6 feet tall.
Yeah, he's like 6'4". He's huge.
Yeah. I'm like pretty like average, like 5'11", 5'10", 5'11" kind of height. So depends on what shoes I wear.
I'm short. Mark's short. Professor's short. The rest of us are short. So the rest of us are normal height, as opposed to you giants. You like giant, you big bird people. So you tell me. We'll start with you because my convention was pretty relaxed because I just I only played one game, but what did you do? Let's go through your experience because you actually did quite a bit, and you also got to see Daggerheart played twice. And the thing about Daggerheart is, last year, it seems like the game has changed a huge amount, but I saw the final printed book, like in the case. Like it's done.
Yeah.
Like it's printed. It's ready to go. They're just getting it to warehouse and going to start shipping in a few months. But there's no more changes being done. So whatever you see is that's it. So
that's what you get. Yeah. So my experience with Daggerheart, as the official Daggerheart correspondent of Roll for Combat, I think it's good that I disclose that I ran it and played it almost a year ago at this point, because it was shortly after, I think, last PAX Unplugged that they released the first big playtest packet. I'd have to look at the dates. It might have been like February or March at the latest, that they released that playtest packet with an adventure, and I ran that for my group. But then I didn't play it since then. I've seen it played a couple times now, 2 times at PAX Unplugged, just recently, of course. And it has changed a good bit since then, like specifically by taking out one mechanic that was a little bit crunchy, I guess. So yeah, because that was kind of my verdict. Like after I ran it with my group once, realizing that, hey, this is really fun. And despite there being a number of different things to track, because people might remember there were action tokens that players would put in when they do a thing on their turn, and that was more or less how you track turns altogether, because there was no initiative order. And then the GM had fear tokens that they could create by spending action tokens, or whenever the players roll with fear, because the core roll, for those who don't know, is 2d12. And one of those represents hope, one of those represents fear, and just whichever is highest determines whether or not the roll was with hope or with fear. So 50% of the time, no matter what your modifiers are, you're rolling with fear, the GM's getting that resource. And then just other simple things like hit points, armor, stress was another mechanic. All of these were pretty much slot based rather than doing some math, I guess, like you typically do in D20 RPGs, I guess. So it felt like a lot to track, but at the same time, it did run surprisingly smoothly. Like I was surprised at how smooth it went for my group, but my ultimate verdict was that, I can still have this much fun with my group without tracking all these things in the middle. So that's when I kind of was like, all right, this is cool, but I'm not going to keep track of every playtest change that comes out. So yeah, I really haven't seen it until, just last week, basically. And the big change was, as far as I could tell, they have removed the action tokens and like the action tracker. So now initiative is pretty much completely freeform. It seems like you can just kind of go whenever you want. You're not even like spending these little tokens to go. And it's a big, one less thing for the GM to worry about. It seems like now the GM just takes their turn whenever a player rolls with fear, so they can still go like 50% of the time, and they can still spend those fear tokens to like do cooler things with enemies, but nobody has to worry about the action tokens anymore.
do they still have cards?
Yeah.
Like, do they still have all those cards to build your character?
They do. Yeah, and that's a big part. Like right now, Daggerheart is available for pre-order. And I think both sets, because there's like a standard and kind of like a premium one. Pretty sure both sets do come with the cards.
So does that mean that, like, let's say you're in a pretty unlikely scenario, like 1 to 2% of the time, where 6 or 7 player actions happen in a row and don't roll with fear? That's going to happen 6 in a row for a little less than 2%, 7 a little less than 1%. In those encounters, they just go and go, and the enemy never gets to go.
So I should have kept better track of this, I guess, but I do think that the GM can still just spend fear to go whenever they want.
Oh, okay.
Like if they're willing to spend one of those tokens, I think then they can just kind of interject even after a roll with hope. But I'm not positive on that. Yeah.
And can they keep the tokens in between encounters?
Yeah. The tokens are like, I think, for the whole session. And for that's a good point. Like for these one shots, the first one shot was by Spencer Stark, who's like the main lead designer on it, I guess. And then the second one was the live show of Critical Role where Matt ran, and both of them said up front that for like a one shot anyway, you want to start with the GM having half as many fear tokens as the number of players in your group. And I don't know then if that would apply to every session, like if you're in an ongoing campaign, or if you're just supposed to like remember how many you had at the end of the previous session or something. But yeah, that's how they did it this weekend.
That makes total sense. So it's the GM's own darn fault if they aren't storing up some of them from like out of combat rolls to allow their big interesting encounter to get a turn if the PCs get very lucky on hook.
Yeah,
that makes total sense.
And at least from what I saw, at least in the Critical Role show, it seemed like most of the rolls were with fear. So it was actually really exciting then when they would finally roll with hope. Because every time Matt was like, and that's a fear token for me. Really emphasizing that.
So that's the other side of the coin, right? If the PCs are rolling with fear 6 times in a row, then there's sure going to be a lot of bad stuff.
Yeah, there could be.
What did you see them play exactly? Because you saw two sessions. So
the first session I watched was labeled as a Daggerheart world building panel. So I went into that thinking it was really going to be about how Daggerheart emphasizes the idea that the GM and the players are really creating the scene together, and like the wider world as well that you play in, because that's kind of been something they've talked about here and there throughout this whole, I guess like marketing process, whatever, last year and a half, whatever it's been. But we haven't seen a lot of like how that's really enforced through the book. But then the panel ended up being about this section of the book called Campaign Frames. And Steven, you told me that Pathfinder does something like this. I'm sure other games do as well, but I don't know how many, like what the page count is like, and I don't remember the total number of campaign frames. It's something like maybe around 10, but basically they are outlines of settings, sort of like subgenres of fantasy that you could run with Daggerheart, just to show people that like, hey, yeah, it's like the core game is built for this high fantasy, heroic kind of genre, but here's all these other things you can do with it, with examples of like what the world could be like, and also how you should change the rules to accommodate that setting. So for example, at the start of the panel, this first one, Matt said that he designed one, I don't remember the name, that is very much like Dark Souls inspired. And it is like the gritty way to play Daggerheart, where you're not recovering as much on a rest, if at all. I don't really remember what the mechanics were, but it's supposed to be like the hardcore one. And then almost in an opposite way, the one that we watched was a little more cartoonish, because it was literally I don't know how much directly inspired by, or if they've just kind of glommed onto it because now this is popular, but they said it's kind of inspired by the Delicious in Dungeon anime or manga, whichever came first. So for those who don't know, Delicious in Dungeon, is like a Netflix show and I guess a manga as well that is a party of adventurers who learn how you can like cook and eat all of these monsters in the dungeon. And so this campaign frame was called Beast Feast, and it's all about how you, instead of recovering everything you normally would on a rest, you recover these stats and whatever by killing monsters, doing your best, because there's like different mechanics for what kind of food you can make, I guess, and then what sorts of things can be recovered from them. And the more experience you have with that kind of monster, the better chance you have of making a good meal that you can recover more things from. So it's kind of a whole other rule set like tacked on to this one, which is pretty interesting. And basically the panel was a little bit about character creation and then more or less just like a combat encounter, kind of like demoing Daggerheart. And then they did do the cooking part at the end, but it was kind of quick, and I didn't pick up on fully like the rules of how it worked, but it's more or less what I just described, I guess.
Okay. By the way, if anyone If any questions, now's the time. I see everyone's in chat, but everyone's being awfully quiet and considerate. No one's chatting at all. So okay.
They just want to hear everything
I guess
about
so.
your PAX Unplugged recap.
I guess so. Everyone's being
Maybe,
so,
yeah.
So yeah, I mean the way Absalon works in Pathfinder. Did you ever play World of Warcraft, Bob?
I haven't, but I'm
Oh my
familiar
God.
with it, of course.
All right. Well, the way World of Warcraft works, and a lot of video games work this way, is like, there's almost like areas of the world, and each area is zoned for, in World of Warcraft, it's zoned for level as well as theme. So like one area might be a desert, but that's only for like level like 10 to 15. One area might be haunted, and it's level like 20 to 25 and so forth. So there's all these like areas that are very specific. And the way it works in Golarion, which actually is one of my favorite things about it, is that whatever you want, they have a land of it. So there's like the haunted land. There's a land of feudal lords. There's a land that's like, it's almost like the France during the rebellion. There's a land that's half science fiction, half fantasy. Like whatever you want, there's a land of it, and then you can go to that land. And what makes it great is that throughout the years, whenever they have adventure paths or adventures, you can go to that land, and then you have a completely different culture and feel to that land. And then even though you're on the same world, one area can be very high fantasy, low magic. One area could be high magic. Like it can be whatever you want. One area could have guns. One area might not. So it's really good. And it's an excellent way to divide up your world and have everything you need. And I always thought that was one of the biggest strengths of Absalon. And I'm kind of amazed.
You mean the Lost Omens setting?
Yeah, the Lost Omens setting.
Because Absalom is just one city.
Oh, I meant the world. Sorry, Golarion. I meant Golarion.
Okay.
Yeah, Golarion.
So when Bob said Steven told me that Pathfinder has rules for something like this, I was really excited because I thought that meant that Steven had remembered about the adventure recipes from the Game Master Guide, which is extremely similar to what Bob said.
Oh, I remember those too.
It has styles of play like dungeon crawl, gritty adventure, high adventure, horror, intrigue, military adventure, mystery, planar adventure, romantic adventure. And then it tells you basically like which types of encounters to use and styles, threats, motivations, story arcs, and things like that. So there is something similar to that in Pathfinder, although it doesn't have as many of built-in variant rules as the ones that Bob described. There are variant rules, just like in D&D in Pathfinder, but they aren't like linked to the genre recipes per se.
Yeah, I haven't seen the material yet, of course, but it does sound like it's pretty robust, like for each of these frames. So I'm curious what the page count will be like for each one, and how detailed they are. And now it's ringing a bell also that even Shadowdark has like I think one page. It might be a spread where there's like pulp mode, and where it's like you get extra luck tokens, and there's a couple other modes like that I can't remember off the top of my head. But yeah, it seems like a lot of games present like, hey, and here's a way to tweak this a little bit, just to different degrees.
So what were the adventures you saw played? Because you saw, what was the world building, which wasn't really, was that really a...
So the world building one was super simple. It was pretty much a single encounter, and where they assembled this party. It was a very like motley crew. Like one of the the character that Matt played was like a mother of 5, and this was like her day away from the kids, but she was this like giant, fighter type character. One of the others was like an old man, retired warrior. One of the others was the ribbit, of course. They had to get a ribbit in there, so they had a little frog guy who was a bard. And by the way, that player, I haven't seen this guy before. And when he introduced himself, like he said his name, I don't remember his name off the top of my head, but he just said he was a comedian. So I don't even know if he like worked on the game in some way, or if they were just like, hey, let's just get a funny guy for this panel. But he was great. And basically all they did in this encounter was fight a dragon. And they even like actually asked the crowd for some like prompts, like, okay, what's a move that this ice dragon should have, and we're thinking about like food stuff here. And somebody was like, brain freeze. And they're like, that's perfect. Yes. And then the dragon had some minions that were these, like, if you remember the abyssal chickens from the Baldur's Gate book a couple years ago, they were kind of like chicken in design, but they were, of course, meant to be food. And somebody was like, all right, what's like a theme for this kind of like chicken creature? And they called on somebody and they said, Cool Ranch. So they were like these Dorito chickens. Anyway, so yeah, that one was obviously very goofy. And basically all they did was fight these chickens and fight this dragon. Then the actual Critical Role live show was a bit more, much more interesting, frankly. I think I might have mentioned to you, Stephen, that during the panel, that panel, I can't remember when now, but Matt Mercer did like plug at some point, hey, this one shot that we're doing for the live show is going to kind of be, it's going to be Christmas themed. They called it Christmas, which is why I'm stumbling over that. But he also said that it's like sort of 80s theme, and he kind of wanted like a Gremlins vibe for it. So I was fully expecting like, okay, the town is being taken over by tons of like tiny little minions of some kind. But what ended up happening, so here's full on spoilers for anyone who plans on watching this. I guess skip 10 minutes ahead if you're watching this as a video later. What ends up happening is that it opens with all the characters playing like teenagers. They're all like in high school or about that age. Some of them younger, some of them like a little older. For example, Travis's character, I think, was supposed to have been like held back a couple times, like should have graduated years ago, but he's still hanging out with the high schoolers kind of character. Two of them were like definitely upper class kids, and it's their parents throwing this kind of high classy Christmas party. And but then for whatever reason, all these other kids are like invited, so they're all kind of like palling around. And one of them, or it's like an NPC, like uncle of those kids, brings this mysterious box that he got from their, dead grandma's storage, locker somewhere or whatever. So of course, this is kind of like the gremlin, the Mogwai box thing. And when they finally get it open, it unleashes this like spirit of winter. I think it might have just been called like the spirit of the solstice or something, that starts immediately transforming the landscape, but also the characters. So they turned from these teenagers into the, kind of almost horrific holiday variants of the races in Daggerheart, the ancestries. So somebody was like Marisha's character was basically like a Wendigo. I'm pretty sure it's called like the fawn, like this deer or goat race or whatever. But she was this like skull moose head, like super tall, lanky thing. Liam was straight up like a Krampus kind of demon. Laura Bailey was basically like a tiny plastic like construct, but like a Christmas tree topper. So she just had these two like candles for hands, and was like a plastic angel, and just various things of that nature. Another notable one was that Travis was just a little like monkey with cymbals, and he wore a hilarious costume as that character. And then the whole goal was to kind of traverse the town, sort of chasing the spirit around, and also what's the word I'm looking for? I guess just defeating some of the other monsters that were being created along the way. So they went to like a comic book store, and maybe one other location, and then it all ended at the high school, of course, where they had to contain the spirit and then stop. I think it was a hag of some kind that was controlling other monsters as well. So it was a lot of fun.
That sounds right up my alley. I did see, so on YouTube there is a behind the scenes video of them like preparing in the backstage, and then they showed the set tour. So I did see that it did take place like in the 80s, like in an 80s basement. It was very 80s theme. And then they see them like just goofing around, doing like skateboard racing down the halls in the back, and people wiping out, and they were just being goofy. So you can find that on YouTube. So I did see that, and yeah, that thing was going long because we went out to dinner beforehand. We went to, Professor says to me, Professor's like, I want a burger and a beer. Find me a place, Steve. And I'm like, ugh, all right. So being the foodie that I am, I found an Irish pub 6 blocks away. And not only was it excellent, but we sat down and the dungeon dudes were sitting right next to us. So
no way.
I was like, okay, I guess this is a good place. So they were leaving as we were sitting down. So we talked to them for just a little while. But now the food was excellent. And then the place was packed by the time we left. So, but then we went back to the Marriott where like everyone and their mothers were there. It's like every single person in PAX goes to the Marriott bar afterwards. So we were all hanging out there. And then it was already like 11 o'clock. And I was like, oh, are you coming, Bob? And you're like, oh, we're still going. It's like intermission. I'm like, oh my God, this is going to be a long show. When did you get back? Must have been like 1 in the morning or something.
There also is a little story between the show ending and then when we actually ended up getting back. Because I think the show ended probably right around midnight.
Okay.
It might have gone a little later. But then, of course, I don't know how many people were there. I'm a really bad judge of that based on just seeing it. But there were a lot of people in this venue, the Freedom Mortgage Pavilion in Camden, if that means anything to anyone. And when we left, of course, then everybody's kind of walking out. We had to walk a couple blocks because they had like closed the roads for some reason right around the venue. Like there wasn't any construction. So I don't know if it was just for this venue, like they didn't want a lot of traffic right around it. But so us and a horde of people all kind of walk to where the streets are open and then start calling Ubers, And so we called one, that took a couple minutes just to like confirm the ride. And then it's like, it'll be here in 20 minutes and we're freezing out there. It's like 25 degrees or something. We've got our coats on and everything. But we're all just like standing outside for a while. And then literally, with a couple minutes to go before this guy should show up, the driver canceled the ride.
Ugh.
I've never had that happen with an Uber.
Oh, I've had that happen many times. They cancel, yeah.
And so then we, it took a while to confirm a second one.
Yeah,
and then
sucks.
for that second one to show up. And then that guy even told us that like, yeah, I guess a bunch of people were calling for, but then like the what's the word? The riders were calling for and then canceling trips. So I guess a lot of the drivers were then like, screw that, I'm not going to that area. But in any case, we finally got back a little after 1 o'clock. It might have been like 1:15.
Oh my God.
And there were still a lot of people in the lobby of the Marriott when we got back. In fact, there's a couple people, and I can't remember the guy's name who I met last year at PAX Unplugged, but he was there with, again, I'm bad with names right now, but with like, I recognize them. They're an artist who did all the art for a recent 5e Kickstarter called Sync. It's like pirate stuff.
Oh yeah,
anyway,
they came on our show. Yeah, they were on our show.
Great.
Yeah,
Okay.
we had them on the show.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this like little crew of people is coming into the Marriott right behind us. And I guess like a doorman basically was like, hey, like basically stopped them. And I needed to like show my room key to like let them in to the place. Cause I guess it was getting so crowded. They were like, yeah, we really want to make sure everybody's actually, I don't know, supposed to be there to some degree. So yeah, there were a lot of people there. And actually that was really cool because one of the people that we went to this live show with is somebody from our home group. And they're a huge fan of the Legends of Avantris, I don't know how to pronounce it, game. The people who published Crooked Moon last year or earlier this year.
Yep.
I don't know if it's actually out yet.
It's not.
And that whole crew was like hanging out right where we walked in. So she got to like say hi to all of them. That was really cool.
They just did an ad for us actually. I was hanging out. I was
nice.
talking to them for a while. They did a great ad for us. So if you watch from 2 weeks ago, Legend of Avantris, you can see the very, very funny, silly ad they did for us for Year of Titans, which ends tomorrow. So you only got one more day.
Oh.
Yeah,
All right.
one more
Now's the
day.
time.
Better hurry up.
Tomorrow at midnight at the end of the day. Oh, someone in chat, Garrett Rawlings, figured out for you, Bob, that the guy who just said he was a comedian is Sean Ellis, who is the lead concept artist for Daggerheart.
I see that. That was a different guy in the panel.
Oh, that's a
'cause
different guy. Okay.
Yeah, there was
Never mind.
there was an artist who was like drawing the characters and the monsters and stuff during the show as well. He did not play, but he was like on the panel.
Okay.
Um,
So that's
yeah.
that's different. That makes more sense to me. I was like, wow, this guy must be so talented to be a lead concept artist and an amazing comedian, like Renaissance man, right? Oh, we got a super chat from Mr. Blawface that said, I want to thank you for the pictures and taking the picture of me with the creators of Outgunned. It was also amazing. I got to run Battlezoo Adventures. My players loved it. Thank you again.
Yeah, he actually ran Jewel the Indigo Isle like 6 times for us at PAX Unplugged, and I met him.
Thank you, Mr. Blawface.
Neil is his name, and it was funny because I was standing next to him and he didn't even know, and then he's like, oh my god. Then he was so excited. Yeah, and then we took a picture with him, and I pulled Bob over, and Bob's in the picture too. Nice. right in front of Outgunned. Yeah, I actually remember, here's the crazy part, Mark. So last week we did a Christmas holiday episode.
We talked about Outgunned.
Outgunned.
Good.
On Wednesday.
It came in second after Shadowdark.
I'm not done. Then on Thursday, it's announced that Free League is publishing it.
Okay.
And then on Friday, I met the writers, and look, she signed and drew a little picture for me.
That's a cool.
That's so cool.
That's a cool signature with the picture. That's awesome.
Too, Steven. So the creators.
Wait, did it say only extreme what?
Only extreme successes, and then the creator signed it for me. So
there you go.
Is that weird?
Awesome.
Went from hey, you should play this game to I now have a signed autographed picture book.
You know what? That proves that you listened to the Roll for Combat Holiday Gift Guide episode when you were looking for what to get, and you were like, but no, I need something that goes on my shelf with the signed special Kelsey Daggerheart. So I'm gonna get a signed special version.
All right. Well, everything I'm getting is signed now. So wait. Well, not only that, they're gonna definitely come on the show. They're Italian. They're super nice.
Awesome.
They also got this action scenes, and I got a little. This was sold out, by the way, immediately. Like as soon as they announced
was saying that they had really cool subgenre versions of it. It looks like you got those too.
And I also got, because I have to get everything signed now. Well, now once I got started, I can't stop because I get something, and then everyone's like, "You want me to sign it?" And I'm like, "Okay, I guess."
Vastgrim there.
I got Vastgrim, and I got that signed too. Where did he sign it? Oh yeah, here we go. He wrote, "Feel the." What do you say? Worms? Well, whatever. I got that signed as well.
Feel the worms. There you go.
Feel the worms. Yeah, from Vastgrim. So yeah, I got a whole bunch of things. Actually, that's all I got. I didn't get a lot. Well, I got I didn't get a lot, but then I got every single Vastgrim there was. So I got a lot of Vastgrim. So. Wow.
And Agile Monk did a super fan chat that said, I truly love this group of Stephen, Mark, and Bob World Builder.
There we go.
Well, you know what? We'll plan to at least make sure we have Bob on next year after PAX to talk about whatever Daggerheart there was.
Every year, every PAX. It's our yearly tradition. Well, yeah. But people asked also, would you play? So now that you've seen it, right. And I'm actually pretty excited. So, but one thing is, so let me tell you my experience. I didn't get to see it played, but I did get to talk to the people. They're about covering it. They definitely, want us to talk about it and cover it on the show. I saw the quality of the book and the screen. And as a printer, I can tell you that it's highest quality. Like they have both UV and gold on it, extremely vibrant colors. Like, they weren't skimping on the print quality at all. Like it was top notch, very expensive book. So that's the good news. And it looked great from what I saw, the few pages that I saw. Obviously, we got to see the whole thing. But do you think you'd actually play this now that you've seen it? I mean, what makes it different? Like, it's the thing. It's like, what makes this different than D&D or Pathfinder? Now, I know. And I'll say those two as opposed to, because Shadowdark is different. Shadowdark is just a different animal completely. When you play it, and by the way, everyone who's my age all says the same thing. Whenever they play Shadowdark, they all say, It's just first edition D&D, and the answer is yeah, I know it is. It's first edition D&D, but better balanced. But it really is first edition D&D.
I would say there are other OSR games out there, Stephen, that if you play Shadowdark and say this is first edition D&D, you will be shocked when you play some other ones where you're like, actually, it's hard to see what's actually different between this and first edition D&D.
I completely agree.
There are differences, but it really
I'm talking about the feel. The feel. It really feels like first edition. It really does. Which is what makes it so much fun. But like Daggerheart, in my opinion, feels more closer to D&D and Pathfinder. But would you play it? Like, is there enough difference? Like, or is it just?
So here's the verdicts on it, and I will begin this with a little testimonial. I'm not going to name this person, but I will say that they have worked on books for Wizards of the Coast. They've done stuff for MCDM. They've done stuff for some of the big, like, other third-party publishers who do a lot of 5e stuff. And they've said that, like, 5e has paid a lot of my bills over the years, but Daggerheart is becoming my home game. So yeah, again, I don't want to like call this person out, but they are like super into it and have been playing it a lot. And I talked to them before the live show to kind of get their take on it, and said that, yeah, pretty much. And so that's what I asked them then. It's like, so like, what's really like, what draws you to that versus Daggerheart? And the main thing that they said is really the idea of those roles, like with fear or with hope, where it just like helps you tack on a little bit of like not just flavor, but some actual like story forward beats to every single role. And like it really makes every role impactful. And it's not just like the pass fail, but it's also different from a system that'll have like just flat out degrees of success. Like it really is more narrative and more dramatic with each role based on that outcome. And I guess it's not to say that like every single thing is over dramatic or melodramatic in some way, but just that it does affect the story. And that was really important to this person. And I enjoy that as well. But personally, like my take from what I've seen so far is that, yeah, I really like the swinginess of a single die roll, like the D20. So that's why I'm definitely like have been really enjoying my Dungeon Crawl Classics home campaign is what I'm running right now. I still enjoy the low levels of 5e, and for that reason is why I also still really love Shadowdark too, because to me Shadowdark with D20 advantage, disadvantage and stuff, it pretty much just feels like the first couple levels of 5th edition, but with characters that are a lot more simple, which I like as a GM. It's just easier to run for those kind of characters. But on the same token, Grace my wife, for those who don't know, Grace World Destroyer, has already said that she would like to run at least a mini campaign of some kind with Daggerheart, because yeah, she's an experienced GM as well, for those who don't know, and has done a bunch of different systems, but she really likes how that works, and the cards and everything, and just those tokens and like the currencies is appealing to her as well. But I like the swinginess of single die. So
we got
I think Bob pointed out a really important point in a value to it, because Stephen, you're like, well, what if you already have your D&D and your Pathfinder and your Shadowdark? What does it bring? It brings, because of the different style. And I think when you said earlier, Stephen, it must be very similar to D&D Pathfinder. I think it's not. And because of the different style and the complexity is in different places, that Bob's example with Grace is awesome, because it means different kinds of GMs and even players who were considering GMing and were on the fence might be attracted to some of those aspects of Daggerheart, and maybe they weren't quite willing to go all the way to run a campaign in D&D, but when they were like, I like these cards and some of these tokens, those kind of deal with the sort of kinesthetic, tactile sense that I like as a GM, I'm willing to run that one so that we can get one of those going. So I think that's a value to it, is it can get different types of people with different sort of mindsets excited.
Yeah, and actually, I think that's kind of an important thing about how they did stick with the cards, because that does set it apart right away from just something like D&D, because you can just, by looking at the artwork, and like the kind of fantasy that they're trying to evoke, which is kind of like kitchen sink, because there's all kinds of different ancestries you can play and everything. In that regard, it on its face, it does look like, oh, it's 5e, like it's D&D 5e. But I do think the mechanics and the like beginner friendly nature of like, oh yeah, okay, these are my cards that make up my character. I think it does make it a lot easier for people to jump in and start like running as a game master too.
So my big question is, I mean, first of all, so next year we got DC 20 coming out. We have the new Sanderson game coming out. We have Daggerheart
Steel.
Steel coming out, maybe.
Yeah. Cosmere is another one that has that success failure, but also with complications, which is maybe more parallel to Rolling with Hope and Fear.
I mean, so we have all these games coming out, and I'm just like, and it's interesting because Tales from the Valiant really still hasn't completely broken through. I know a lot of people enjoy it, but everyone keeps saying it's just another flavor of D&D, at least the people I've spoken to, and like it doesn't
that's
feel.
What they were trying to do. To be fair,
like, that's what they were doing, but that's like, but it's not different enough.
Was in an unknown situation. Yeah. Nobody knew what was going to happen. Nobody knew if it was possible they were going to go with the extreme version of it. And at the time, they said they were. And so Tales of the Valiant was kind of a like, well, last time there was something that happened like this was the GSL for 4E, and they needed a Pathfinder. So that was very, very similar to 3.5. So let's do that. Like, to be clear, like, Steve, when you're always like, yeah, Tales of the Valiant, people like it, but then they also say it's very like D&D. That's not like, that is in no way any kind of a negative or failure. That is a success point because that was exactly what they were trying to do. It just turned out they didn't need to do it as much as they thought they did once all that OGL stuff was reversed.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm just saying.
One other interesting thing about Tales of the Valiant is, from what I know, because I haven't kept up on that too closely, I'm kind of waiting for their starter box to come out next year. But I've heard that they stuck with a number of things that were proposed in the earliest versions of like 1D&D, when they announced a couple big changes, like there's the spell lists are done differently, and a few things like that people liked from the early D&D update playtest, whatever. But then they walked a lot of that back. Tales of the Valiant stuck with a lot of those changes, and so it is more like, I guess, not quite as far as DC 20 by any means, but it is a little bit of an evolution of D&D, whereas 2024 really did seem to stick as close to 2014 as possible, from what I see anyway.
My point is just that it seems so hard to make people leave Dungeons and Dragons. It's just it's so impossibly hard.
Well, that's why you don't try. There's no reason to try to make people leave Dungeons and Dragons. Like, people are happy playing Dungeons and Dragons, but you can try to have people broaden what games they're playing and also play other games in addition to Dungeons and Dragons for what those games bring. And I think Daggerheart with the cards and the tokens has an immediate look. When you look at it, you say, this is something different. And that can help make someone be playing D&D and Daggerheart. There should never be a goal of, let's change someone playing D&D to only playing Daggerheart. That's just doomed to failure most of the time. But once you get them playing D&D and Daggerheart, now they will actually be more likely to play Dungeon Crawl Classics or Pathfinder or something else once they've played a second game. And then later they may discover one of those is their favorite that isn't D&D. And so that's sort of how the evolution of a gamer who moves past the D&D sort of gateway phase works. It usually doesn't work of like D&D. Oh, that's done. I'm doing something else. Unless it's internally motivated and they just got fed up with D&D for some reason. They're just like, I can't. My group just raffle stomps every fight. It's too easy. I don't like this roll. I'm moving on. We're moving on. If it doesn't come from within, you can't really cause that to happen. Maybe you shouldn't try it.
Yeah, but here's the thing: is that because this is happening in the video game industry right now, where so there's these live play games, like games where you basically play, and it's kind of like a lifestyle, like the Fortnites, and there've been Sony famously came out with a game a few months ago that they spent $400 million on 7 years, and they expected it to be the next Fortnite. It came out, less than 1,000 people were playing it, and after 2 weeks they canceled it and just fired everyone. So it's like, yeah, Concord. The point is that there's so many of these live service games that come and go because Fortnite is pretty much, or Call of Duty, there's only so many of these games that A, will win, and B, they take up everyone's time. So there's so much invested in these games that if you're already invested in the game, you're not going to leave. It takes a lot to move someone out. And I see people are like, oh, people are sick of D&D, they're moving, they're not. Once you start playing D&D, it's very hard to leave D&D. And you're saying, oh, we'll play both. That is like 0.0001% of the audience. No one has time to play both. I know maybe you do, but very rarely. People barely have enough time to play one game, let alone 2 or 3 different types of games.
That's an exaggeration. And I would say
you or me?
0.001% is an exaggeration.
I think it's lower. I think it's way lower than that. I think it's extremely
We might be talking about
low.
2 different things. I think Steven might be saying like having multiple games running, like multiple campaigns concurrently. Whereas the way I see it, like the way my group does it, is we're playing DCC right now, but before that we were playing 5e. And like just during the month of October for Halloween, we took a break from DCC and we did like a session of Mouse Ritter. We did a session of Into the Odd. We did a session of 10 Candles for like mixing up for the holidays. But then we got back to the DCC campaign. I mean, so I think I think that's the feasible way that more people can do it. I still don't think it's super popular. Like I would agree that I'm in a minority maybe that my group is so open to that many different games for sure. But I think that is and Mark was kind of just saying this, but I think that's the future I would like to see, where these groups that have like a built-in huge audience, we're talking Critical Role, we're talking Matt Colville, and even like Kobold Press, just if they can get someone to buy that other core rulebook, and then eventually, if some of the people who buy it play it, and then see like, oh yeah, this has a couple different things that I actually like that are different from D&D, that's kind of like the win. Like it doesn't need to be we're going to move completely to this other game. It's just like try these other things, realize there's more out there, and ultimately, I think most people do kind of play their own version of whatever game they're playing. Like very few people. Like I would also say this, that a very tiny percentage are actually playing every rule as written. You know what I mean? Most people are changing the game in some way. So if they can just get some ideas from something else, then that's still a success, I think, for the designers. So, yeah.
So
what I was saying is that people,
Steven, like,
I'm saying people have limited time, and they're only going to play what they want to play, what they have.
Sometimes the other things they play are one shots, but it's somewhere around 90%, something like that. Tabletop RPG gamers only play Dungeons and Dragons, just based on if you look at like sales data and reported data, and some reported data is even higher than that on certain platforms, but then those platforms are ones that are high for Dungeons and Dragons and not for the other ones. So let's just say it's around there. But of those remaining 10%, most of them actually play multiple RPGs, and a lot of them also do play Dungeons and Dragons sometimes, right? It's just that that's not the only game that they play. So there aren't like relatively as many people who are just like, you know what though? Mouse Ritter is the only tabletop RPG I've ever played in my life, and I'm never going to play anything except Mouse Ritter ever. Like there's just like almost no one who's like that.
Right. That's a good point. Like there's going to be almost no one who does that, because for the vast majority of people, you only even realize those games exist after being exposed to D&D. I know now, of course, cue the people in the chat who are like, well, my first game was, whatever, but Castles and Crusades. But for a lot of people, it's D&D first, and then something else.
My point is that there's so many of these games. I mean, look at Avatar. I keep thinking the one that I keep thinking about is Avatar: Last Airbender.
Yeah, and you have a good point with this one. Yeah,
makes $10 million. No one plays it. No one talks about it.
Again.
I didn't even see it for sale anywhere on PAX Unplugged. I didn't see it anywhere.
Yeah, they had like a card game for Avatar, but I didn't see
nothing.
The role-playing game.
Yeah, nothing. Yeah. And there's a new book out, and I didn't see it anywhere. I was actively looking for it. It's like, how is it? It's like, it's just amazing that these games. This is kind of what Avatar, the movie. Okay, maybe it's the word Avatar. The movie Avatar is actually heavily studied in film schools because Avatar was the highest grossing movie of all time. Unbelievable special effects. Everyone saw it. Everyone started doing 3D movies for like 10 plus years because of it. No cultural impact at all. Zero cultural impact. Okay, you couldn't even name anything about that movie if you tried. It's like it just no cultural impact. It's amazing. And then Avatar 2 came out. Again, highest grossing movie of all time. No cultural impact.
Completely forgotten.
Yeah, well, completely forgotten.
The only thing I could say about Avatar there, and again, we're getting kind of off track with the movie.
We're not.
Well, maybe, but
I'll get back to it. You'll see.
I was gonna say the movie, like the original Avatar, if I'm not mistaken, because Grant, I saw it when I was in high school. But it is pretty much just a reskin of Dances with Wolves, right? So like that had the cultural impact. So like it's hard for something that is literally just rewriting a story in a different setting. I feel like it's hard for it to even have a cultural.
I won't get into that. If you want to start talking storytelling, everything is a derivative of something else. Yeah, I can go on forever on that. But yeah, no, it was a rewriting of that. It was a rewriting of the last of Fern Gully. It was a lot. It was a lot of those type of movies. But in fact, someone I just saw, Red Letter Media, just did a side-by-side comparison of Galaxy Quest and The Three Amigos, two of my favorite movies. They're exactly the same movie. In fact, they did side-by-side comparison for 5 minutes, showing they're exactly the same in every way, shape, or form, including the scenes. I was like, oh my God, I never put that together, that these are the exact same movie. And they're completely different genres, but they're exactly the same. And every movie is a heist. That's true. Every movie is a heist.
Stephen, it looks like you're continuing to be right when you say, without hyperbole, that they didn't offer any games of Avatar. Because I'm looking, Magpie Games was there at PAX Unplugged, but it looks like they had Masks, Urban Shadows, Bluebeard's Bride, Zombie World, Passing, and Rapscallion, but they did not oh no, that was a much earlier year.
I was actually looking on the show floor because there's a new book out, and I was just curious. I couldn't find it anywhere.
So maybe they haven't done demos since that year, because
I'm talking about
maybe they didn't find the demos were valuable to them.
Yeah, but there was people that were selling other games, it wasn't just manufacturers. There's like people with game stores there selling books, and I couldn't find Avatar. Like, it's just not on the floor.
And I'll say that I'm reading in the chat here. Ionia says, I like a lot about the Avatar RPG, but I think the lack of actual combat and risk of character death puts me off. I know you can change things, but learning a system just to change it is too much. And that's, I think, a big part of the failing of Avatar RPG is that it's powered by the apocalypse, not 5e. Like, if they made it 5e, or even if they just made it original, really based on Avatar, I think that could have gotten a lot farther. But the fact that, I just don't know if powered by the apocalypse translates as well to as many things as people seem to think it does, I guess.
I think it does for some people, but it depends on the person's own way that they sort of see fantasies and see things happening at the table. Because my little brother is someone who's very concrete, and he wants an ability that says he can do thing X. He doesn't want to be told, you can vaguely bend, just describe anything, and then you did that. He wants to be like, no, if I'm told that I can make like a dragon out of stone, then I want mechanics that tell me what the dragon out of stone is doing and why that's better than not being able to do that. And when he played Avatar Legends, he said that he felt like he liked most of the things that he could do, but he felt that his bending was very disappointing because
Right,
it was
yeah.
very loosey goosey. His non-bending, he was like the social, some of the things with like pushing people off on tilt and other things like that were very interesting, and how those mechanics work. But when it came to bending, he was like, this very much to him felt like it let him down because it wasn't mechanically grounded.
Yeah, I've only played a little Powered by the Apocalypse, but it yeah, from what I know, it is not built for combat like D&D and other games are, where that's kind of the main pillar. And in a universe where like the coolest thing is, you know, throwing water at somebody to knock them out and run away or whatever, I feel like that could have used a different system probably.
So the reason I'm bringing this all up is that what will be the future of Shadowdark? Now, they have one huge wild card that no one else has, and that's Critical Role. So,
Oh, you mean Daggerheart?
You said Daggerheart.
Daggerheart. I meant
You said
Daggerheart.
Shadowdark.
I meant Shadow. I meant they all sound Shadowdark, Daggerheart,
Yeah.
Dagger Shadow, Shadow Dagger. They're all the same.
Shadowheart.
Yes, Shadowheart. They're all. Is that they have Mad Mercer and they have Critical Role, and we talked about this last week. It's like if Critical Role changes to Daggerheart, will they lose viewers? And a lot of people said they wouldn't watch it because they want to see D&D, that they actually want to see D&D, and so they might lose viewers. Or B, will that make people more inclined to play it? Now, I'm going to caveat this with
The
one.
answer could be yes to both.
Wait.
by the way.
I'm going to caveat to one aspect. The caveat is that, and this has been proven, is that Critical Role products like their minifigs and other things and other items do not sell. In fact, they've been selling very poorly to the point that WizKids even canceled their line. So they're in an
This
interesting.
is like the toys, right? Not
yeah, the
books.
toys, but
What about the books? How did those do?
the books have actually done pretty well, but those are comics though. They have like I think comics, don't
And
they?
what about the RPG books that they put out under Darrington?
I could look that up while we're talking, but
Yeah,
I'm
that'd
very
be really
interested.
cool to see the BookScan for.
I'll look it
Candela
up
Obscura,
while we
right?
talk.
Yeah. Would it even show up in BookScan? I
oh,
don't
it
know.
will. It will. Oh, I
Okay.
have. Yeah.
But
Everything.
they might
My
not
books
have
show up
done
in
a
book.
huge amount of distribution that way compared to
Right,
other
that might have
channels.
mostly been just their website, pretty much. I would think, actually,
Because they may have done
Maybe.
a lot of direct sales.
because even for Daggerheart, I think it's all the pre-orders are just through them for Daggerheart. I don't
Perhaps.
think
So
it's
they're going to be low on
external like
BookScan.
at all.
Well,
Yeah.
if you guys give me a sec, I'll look it up.
Yeah,
But,
we'll give you the
Yeah.
time. I'm just curious
But-
because sometimes you can be popular in certain ways that do not convert into a different type of product sale.
Right.
One thing that I'm thinking of is Young Justice, which was a very
Totally.
good cartoon show, but it was not selling enough action figures, so they canceled it. And they uncanceled
Oh.
it when a lot of people really wanted to see
Yeah.
it more, but it happened that it didn't convert into enough action figures. And so Critical Role to me seems like it might be more likely to sell books and RPG products than those toys and action figures, because I don't know about you, but I'd be more interested in seeing a product that's like play cool RPGs, like Matt is running on Critical Role, than like here's a Scanlan action figure.
Yeah.
It looks
I
just
think
like
those-
him.
Yeah, to me, those action like they're from what I've seen. Again, like I'm not really tuned into Critical Role merch, but I feel like those like the action figures they make, it's usually more like these little statues that are really just for hardcore collectors because they're also not cheap from what I
Yeah.
remember seeing. So it's like, yeah, they're not going to sell that many, Molly Mock 10-inch desk statues. Like who's gonna like how many people are gonna buy that? You know what I mean? So I don't expect that to do huge numbers of sales, but I guess it still could probably earn well depending on what their margin is. I really don't know enough about that stuff. But yeah, I would be curious about Candela because I know that had, at least on YouTube, that had like mixed reviews of what people thought about it. My group really enjoyed it last Halloween, not this year. But I will say a little testimonial, like it kind of replaced Call of Cthulhu for us because it sort of hits the same feel, but it's just a lot less to remember because there's so many fewer stats and everything.
Yeah, I mean, I can see that. I think that in general, fantasy RPGs tend to do like a little more from than like certain other subgenres, or at least that was the common wisdom if you're a bigger publisher. Like, let's say you are publishing your big fantasy RPG and then you're doing your science fantasy or science fiction RPG. Usually you expect your science fiction one to do worse, even if it has a Star Wars co-branding on it. And one of the exceptions to that rule was Starfinder, the first edition of it, which it was a notable exception because Piso people absolutely knew that rule. So they printed it about expecting that, and then it sold out at the Gen Con that it came out because it actually did quite well comparably to Pathfinder first edition with Starfinder first edition. But usually you don't. And so even if Candela didn't do as well, that actually I would say doesn't necessarily mean Daggerheart won't. But
Yeah, it's very different.
All right, sorry, it took me a while. They completely changed the websites, and now what am I looking up?
Candela Obscura.
or looking up anything from Darrington, really. Candela or any of their previous, like, what is it, Tal'Dorei campaign setting?
How do you spell it? Candela.
Oh yeah, Tal'Dorei Reborn.
Yeah,
might
look
be
up
probably
Tal'Dorei
the bestseller,
Reborn.
because that was also available a bunch of different places. Like I think our copy of that came from our local game store. Oh, but local game stores I don't think are on BookScan. I don't remember.
They're not.
Which
So that would
ones
be
are? Which ones are?
TAL.
Yeah, it's weirdly. Hold on, I'm just getting the exact.
POREI.
Yeah, the spelling's weird. Of course it is, because
But I know that one. At least that one seemed very popular. Tal'Dorei Reborn, because it's even that was one of the first third-party books on D&D Beyond. If I
Critical
remember
Role
correctly.
campaign setting. Tal'Dorei Reborn. Okay, that's the original book. So there's two versions. I actually have version 1.
But wasn't the Reborn one the
Reborn is
Yeah,
the
but I'm
newer
looking
one.
at the
new one?
original.
That's why it has Reborn on it.
So the original, hold on, I'm getting there. The original campaign setting has sold, well, it's a lot actually. How many do you think it sold? It actually sold, and this is just big box, doesn't include gaming stores,
doesn't
anything
include
like
direct sales or anything else. And
Yeah.
so
Well,
big box wouldn't be their biggest thing.
And it came out October 17th, 2017.
Okay.
Yeah.
And it's still selling. It hasn't sold since. I can tell you when it stopped selling.
Let's compare it to a 2017 WoTC release, which we know should be more.
It looks like they stopped selling it actively around
When the new one
May
came out,
2021.
so.
It stopped selling.
Okay, around when the OGL stuff, but before.
Yeah. I don't even. My time frame is really off. OGL was beginning of 2023, right? January 2023.
Wait, I thought it was 20.
Or was it 2022? And I'm
Was
losing
it
it.
2022? It just feels like it's been so long.
But I
maybe
know
it
it's
was
been
beginning
like
of
2
2023.
years.
Wait, what? When?
No,
What
I
are
think
you
it was
asking me? Oh, it was
2023.
the beginning of 2023. It was last year.
Yeah, it was the beginning of 2023. So you're right. This
January.
is a while before OGL.
Technically, it started December 2022, but it really started in 2023, January, like January 5th or so, when we started the whole thing. Around
Right. December was when people like them were being
there was
approached.
like rumblings.
murmurings.
Yeah,
Yeah.
murmurings and rumblings.
All right. Well, what are the sales, Steven? I'm dying to know now.
44,846.
That's really good. For
That's
BookScan
really
numbers.
good. That's
See?
really good.
I think that the Tal'Dorei campaign setting is something that would be more comparable to Daggerheart because it's about the same. Maybe it will be better because it's usable in 5e and it's with the campaign.
And it's literally based in the campaign.
For those
yeah,
who
exactly.
don't know, people think 44,000 is not that great. I will give you an idea of what the best sellers were just for this week. Just give you an idea of what numbers are, what like a really big printing is. This is insane. Okay, so the latest Diary of the Wimpy Kid book, number 19, came out last week. And that sold... Number 1, that was 71,000 copies total in 1 week.
And that was number 1.
Admittedly, that was in a week.
That's number 1. But number 2 is Wicked, and that sold 41,000 copies. And that would be number 2 on the New York Times bestseller list. So 44,000 copies doesn't sound like a lot. And that's true. It's over the lifetime of a book. That's a lot of sales. Like the metric is, if you're over 5,000, that is a lot. If you're in 10,000 or higher, that's like a huge hit. It's which is kind of depressing if you think about it. It's like 10,000 is a huge hit. I'm like, it's really kind of sad.
That's an enormous hit, especially for the tabletop industry.
Yeah. So 44,000 is a lot. Now,
and I just saw somewhere. Oh, go ahead, Steve.
No, I'm just looking at you talk. I'm looking at Darrington Press. I'm trying to find it.
Because I do want to hear more about this. But I was seeing in chat, someone said that they own the PDF of Tal'Dorei. So I assume they mean the original one. I don't know if Reborn also had a PDF come out.
I don't know. So here's the funny thing. I have the Reborn version. I bought the Reborn version. It came and it was horribly damaged. And I wrote them and I said, hey, can I get like a new copy? You know, like, and I showed them like the damage was really bad. And they're like, well, what you can do is if you send back this copy, we will refund you and then you could order a new one. And I was like, what? I was actually so put off by that consumer experience that I didn't even bother. So I don't even have the Tal'Dorei Reborn.
That was sending it back at your expense. And...
No, they gave me a sheet, but the point was, I'm like, really? Like, look how damaged it was. It was like, come on. Do you really think I'm going to keep this? Like, it was heavily damaged. It wasn't like, there's a corner bent. You know, it was like really badly damaged. And I was like, you know what? And then I got to reorder it after you give me the credit. What I do when we get broken,
I've seen Steven do this, by the way. He's not making it up.
Yeah, what I do is that if you have a book that's messed up, I send you a new one. I'm like, there you go. That's it. I mean, what's the big deal? Like, I don't make you go through all these hoops. I mean, Jesus.
He didn't make them send it back. Even some of the ones weren't that messed up, but they looked very... Yeah. Some of the ones that he gave replacements for looked very bad because they were, like, chipped on the cover pretty nastily, but the book was fine inside. Steven always sent people a replacement.
Yeah, it's so ridiculous. I mean, that's cost of doing business. And that's what put me off, so I've never gone in it. Now, if they get the wrong version, I do ask them to send it back. That actually happens once in a while, that they'll get the Pathfinder when they order 5e. And then we will send them a package and the return label and the book. And we'll say, we're going to send you everything you need. Please send back the other copy if you don't mind. And then we send it to them. They get it. They return it. And they can just drop it off the post office. Again, I try to make it as easy as possible for you. But anyhow, it doesn't look like it's on BookScan, the Reborn, believe it or not, which is weird because I thought it would be, but I don't see it. I looked at Darrington Press. Darrington Press is not listed in BookScan.
Interestingly, maybe they didn't go to big boxes anymore when they were doing it under that imprint.
Yeah, I don't even see them listed as an imprint. Hold on.
It looks like you can get it on Amazon.
Well, then it would be. BookScan, right? It should be on that.
But look at that. It's actually listed. It says brand Wizards of the Coast for D&D Tal'Dorei Reborn. So that's very strange.
Well, that case. Now I'm looking under Wizards of the Coast because he's got to tell me how to find it, and I will find it. Hold on.
Yeah, the product title on Amazon is literally D&D RPG : Tal'Dorei Reborn 5e campaign setting hardcover.
Interesting.
So that's very strange.
All right, hold on.
There you go.
Now I'm going to look.
In any case, the reason I mentioned that that person said they own the PDF of Tal'Dorei was because I don't think they're doing PDFs for Daggerheart. From what I could tell, it looks like the pre-order looks like it's just the physical product. And I know there's like you can get it on what's that, Demiplane, I think, and probably some other VTTs. But I don't know if they're doing if they're actually distributing a PDF for this book or not. So that could change.
Let's see. I'm looking up Tal'Dorei. I can't find it. It's so weird. I mean, maybe the spelling or something. I don't know.
I think that the fact that the first one was in the 40,000s really gives you an indication from the BookScan, at least, that there's some pretty strong potential. Obviously, that was for a book that was literally in 5e for a setting that they already were watching the show, rather than, hey, this is all new. This is all us. This is a new game system. So it is a little bit of apples and orange comparison, but at least that's better than like apples and like a cow.
Apples and
Yeah,
cows.
which is Candela,
I like apples
Candela
and
Obscura
cows.
is the cow.
Yes, that's right. It's like there could be food that comes from the cow at some point. It wouldn't be a vegetable or fruit if that was to happen, and right now it's a cow.
So let's really get in trouble. Because why not? We're here.
Why
What
are
do
you
you
doing this,
think
Steven?
the sales are of? I have the
Why are
player's
you getting in
handbook.
trouble? This is something people can look up if
Well, I
they
think
go to the play.
we've all right. So the player's handbook. What else? What do we
The
got?
player's handbook. I have the Dungeon Master's Guide 2024, and
24. Okay.
yeah, 24, and the Dungeon Master screens. I have the official skills number.
But we know they funneled 2024, and there's been reporting from like the actual news outlets that they specifically they had it limited supply and they throttled the big box stores and gave it more to other places first.
Wrong.
So we
They
do know that.
throttled it because they couldn't come to an agreement. Because
Well, that explains part of it too. But that is like the BookScan numbers being low is actually explained by that.
I
Right?
agree, but there's low and then there's low. Okay, like you have to remember that the original numbers were in the hundreds of thousands for these
because
books.
they changed the way they were doing distribution. They took out Random House. They
I know,
are doing
but-
it differently now. They're doing it themselves as much as they can.
Yes, but again, but what do you think? What do you think the Dungeon Master's Guide is up to right now? Now, the funny thing is, Bob and I were talking about this because I put out a video and I get hundreds of people hating on me on the YouTube video saying, how dare I go against D&D and I hate D&D and blah, blah, blah. And then Bob does the exact same video and everyone's like, thank you, Bob, for clarifying this. I'm like, everyone gives Bob love.
My video was specifically saying the things in your video, but with the reverse thumbnail.
I know.
That was the thing. It's literally people, too many people these days, will just base their comment and complete attitude of a video on how the thumbnail is framed.
It was just funny.
So you really, So from what I remember, those player handbook numbers at the time were like 4,000 copies in BookScan.
Yeah.
So are we looking at lifetime? So it's been a couple months since then?
Lifetime.
Okay.
So then I would say probably like 6,000 or 7,000 players handbook. And I guess the Dungeon Master's Guide, I would say like 2,000.
Interesting. So
I'm gonna guess something very similar, less than double for a player's handbook from what you had before, Bob. And then for Dungeon Master's Guide, you're gonna get usually like a third at best. Because a lot of people get the player's handbook and they do not get the Dungeon Master's Guide, they do not get the monster manual.
So it says here, by the way, so don't forget, Player's Handbook came out September 16th. DM Guide came out almost a month ago.
Right.
November 12th.
And I guess these are BookScan. So
BookScan.
they're a subsection of purchasers who were not the main people who got it. So they may have unusual habits in that maybe they buy Dungeon Master's Guide at a higher rate because they're more likely to be GM.
However, there's one very important thing you have to remember about BookScan that everyone keeps ignoring. BookScan does include Amazon, okay? And Amazon is something like 30% of everything in America is bought on Amazon. So it's kind of insane so you can't ignore that. So it's up to 17,254 for the Player's Handbook. It's been out for about 12 weeks. Yeah, it's
Okay. The fact that it went up by that high of a multiplier, I guess I should have realized that because the throttling was temporary, right? And so when everyone was looking at those videos before, it was during the limit, and they probably got more books out.
Well, the first 4 weeks it sold. I have the numbers here. The first 4 weeks it sold 8,277 copies. First 8 weeks it sold 13,000 copies, and then the first 12 weeks it sold 17,000 copies. So it's actually doing a relative brisk 1,500 to 2,000 copies a week.
Pretty consistent.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
What about the Dungeon Master Guide? How many per week?
We're up to
Is it like a third?
We're up to 5,006.
Hey, it's about a third, right? So our ratios were right. We just didn't realize how much it grew over after those first few weeks.
Here's my favorite one, though. the Dungeon Master's screen. How many do you think of that was sold, huh? And that came out only on this 26th. That's only been out for about 3 weeks now.
I feel like. Well, wait. What did you just say? The DMG was like 5,000?
5,006.
500 for the screen then?
I was gonna say 500, but the Steven's voice and the way he tantalized us with saying it was only out for a short amount of time makes it sound like he thinks it was higher than we would expect.
You fell for your guys are falling for my GM voice. I'm so good.
I'm gonna stick with 500 because that was what I was thinking before.
501.
Oh, it's like, oh yeah, you're like 501. Oh, it's like
you're gonna price it right.
Price is right. No, it's whoever's closest. It's not lowest. Bob wins 567.
Oh wow, we were extremely close.
You guys were close. So it's about a tenth of DM. So 1 out of 10 people. So the unofficial numbers are about 1 out of every third by the Dungeon Master's Guide that buy the Player's Handbook, and 1 out of every 10 buy the screen that buy the handbook. So there you go. The funny thing is, I bet you go over time, over a year, those numbers are going to stay consistent. That's the thing. You don't need that big of a sample size to stay pretty consistent.
They normally would for GM books. That's one of the reasons why I think Bob and I were able to predict the ratio, is because you kind of see that. Because typically you have 1 GM to 4 players, but that's not quite the ratio of buying, because there's some people who like kind of want to have it for the whole set, to collect the whole set, or because it has magic items.
The magic items, yeah.
Yeah, so...
And actually, that's one other thing I really like about Daggerheart, though, and I told because that's another... sort of back to the topic, PAX Unplugged. I did get to talk to Spencer Stark and Rowan Hall, who is another designer on it. And I told them how much I love that the GM rules and player rules are just in one book. I think as long as the game, doesn't have several hundred pages covering player stuff, because like obviously with D&D, it'd be pretty hard to put that all in one book. I think it's great when games do that. So.
Yeah,
I was saying
I can tell you that Pathfinder did that and met with some. It doesn't do it now in the remaster, but it did it up until then, and met with some definite drawback from that, where people just were like, "This game must be impossible to learn because the book is so big." And it's like, well, it's so much bigger than the D&D book. It's like, well, but it has 2 books in it, and it's like the actual gameplay that you have to learn to play the game is like 12 pages.
So let's look at the old. Now let's compare to 2014. So how many copies of the Player's Handbook? The core
Why
Player's
are we
Handbook.
comparing to 2014 when they had a completely different distribution model? But I think it's like 500,000. It's some very high amount.
What do you think, Bob? What do you think it's up to?
I got distracted here because I'm looking at a question in the chat from a friend of the channel, Elder Goblin Games, who says, "Tell them the Delve sales." And off the top of my head, I don't actually know the sales, but I had to remind myself of the number of backers, which I thought was only like 4,000. But I guess from BackerKit, we've had a ton more people back it. So the backers on Delve is close to 7,000 now.
Jesus.
Of course, a lot of those folks are just PDF.
Right.
So I don't know the hard copies total, but then of course some people got the 5e version and the Shadowdark version. So yeah, I don't know the Delve sales off the top of my head. Fortunately, I have great people I'm working with who get to think about that stuff, so I don't have to. So yeah.
Well, I'm just curious, what do you think the core rulebook is? Because here's the thing, they're still selling the core rulebook, and it's still sold. I'll give you an idea. The 2014 core rulebook sold 360 copies last week, and the 2024 version sold 1,500 copies. So it's still selling. It's still selling, like not bad. I mean, 400 copies, 350, not nothing.
So what are we guessing now then? Sorry.
The lifetime 2014 core rulebook sales, the Player's Handbook.
Player's Handbook, right?
I remember from, I mean, this granted was probably a year ago when you first did one of these videos, I think with Professor talking about this stuff, that it was like 1.1, maybe 1.5 million. So I would guess at most
maybe I was off.
1.6. Yeah.
Bob wins again. 1,729,991.
See, I didn't remember from them. I knew it had to be
1.73
at
million.
least-
Okay.
I
I couldn't
knew it had to be a
remember.
lot.
I know the top two were the Player's Handbook and Lost Mine of Fandelver. That starter set, I think, were both over 1 million.
The D&D starter set is literally 1,004,820. And it sold 7 copies last week. This year, it's only sold 1,600 copies. The D&D Player's Handbook this year sold 71,000 copies just this year.
Yeah, I don't know if they've also pulled back on the Lost Mine starter set, and they're just pushing the newer starter set now.
They could just be out of copies. Like
Yeah.
that's something else that happens.
Because another thing is, since they published that other hardcover book, Fandelver and Below, right? That contained all of Lost Mines plus some other stuff. So I think they kind of want people to forget about Lost Mine of Fandelver, even though it was like the best, the best one in a lot of people's opinion.
But give you an idea, like, it's really amazing when you start seeing, because the number of books, like most everything else is, you know what really is incredible? The ABCs of D&D, you know, the D&D ABC children's book, if you want to look that up. 74,000 copies of that thing.
Wow. And is that from Wizards of the Coast? Who publishes that?
It's Wizards.
Okay.
It's the ABCs of D&D. It's just...
You know, I did actually just get a set of the Young Adventurers books, if you're familiar with that series that D&D puts out.
Young Adventurers book, 75,722 copies sold. The box set. Yeah. There you go.
So, Steven, I have a question for you on this then. Even though we talked about, you know, they've changed the distribution, maybe they're doing less on there.
Yeah.
You're saying it's making up 1,500 a week consistently at this point on the Player's Handbook. After 10 years in 2034, if it keeps doing that, how many do you think that means it will have sold?
Well, it's not going to keep that up because
of course
it
won't.
Yes.
Because these were its first launch times. But how much do you think it will have sold?
So
what did we say? 3,000 a week?
Yeah, no, 1,500 a week. So if it's 1,500 a week, so that's like
roughly 50 weeks a year for 10 years, 500 weeks, 500 times 1,500.
Yeah, exactly.
Mark, you're the calculator, right?
No, so that's like
it would be between 700 and 800,000.
Yeah, exactly.
Almost 800,000.
I was going to say it's really going to probably go down to like 500,000.
Interesting, but it would be. Oh, but again,
it'll scale because it'll go down.
That it currently has. Then after 10 years, it would have about 800,000, which is about half of what the other one did. However, they clearly redistributed things.
They're selling in different places, so.
Yeah. But keep in mind, the Player's Handbook sold in its first year alone. It sold 127,000 copies, which I'm looking at here.
Right.
So,
but it still goes back to the fact that they're mostly selling it on D&D Beyond now.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's really what I keep saying. It's the point is that they won. Their point is they wanted to limit the sales to as much online as possible, and they did.
And they did.
And it worked. And the numbers prove it. Because people are like, it's not unpopular. And I completely agree. I agree with every single one. I'm like, I bet you it's just as popular, if not more popular. That they wanted all the sales to go direct, and they did it. They pretty much did it.
Because what was the, I would say not like a week or couple weeks after the original BookScan, story for this Player's Handbook, then there was an article with like an interview from, I forget her name.
Yeah, I know. They said that they printed more copies, 3 times more copies than they ever printed before. But they're very vague, and that's like the oldest trick in the book, because they will say exactly what they want to say. If they're very exact, then they're very proud, and they're saying, "Oh, this is like." We don't know what the first printing of the D&D book was, and the first printing could have been 150,000 copies for all we know. It probably was even closer. It was probably like 100,000 copies. So they could have just done 300,000 copies for their first printing, and now they can say, "Oh, it's the highest printing of all time," because we're not printing anymore. So, there's a lot of ways to finagle those numbers. Now, the Player's Handbook is up to its 10th printing, I believe. So, yeah, it was just... You know what? I don't know. It's like you read these and you have to see how they word stuff, because they always word it extremely carefully. They always leave out certain things. Like they'll leave out like, oh yeah, we forgot to mention that it was our highest printing book for this amount of time for this language in this part of the world. It's like, oh, okay, it's very specific, like they're always doing crap like that. So, but it doesn't matter. Like, that's an internal decision. Like, they could just decide that, hey, let's just get it all printed up and warehouse it, because we're getting rid of so many toys, which they've been doing. Like, they've been emptying their warehouse extensively. Like, they're really emptying their warehouse. So maybe they're just printing it up and warehousing it for now, because they don't want to deal with it later. I mean, who knows? There's all this stuff.
So am I going to be able to get the DM screen at Ollie's for $1 in a couple months?
No, but you can get the Transformers at Ollie's next month, because they just liquidated. So they're liquidating everything at their Rhode Island warehousing, because they're moving to Boston. So they have been liquidating, like, not only that, they've been liquidating collector's items. So people are furious, because it's not like that they're liquidating $10 Transformers items. They'll be like the $250 Transformer limited edition that you can now get for like $20. Because
now it's back to the equivalent of like those $150 statues of a Critical Role character are now like $10. Okay.
Yeah. Well, the big one was that Game of Turn or whatever that was, like the Dragonlance game that was $100 that got totally wrecked and no one bought, and you can get it Ollie's for $5. It was like, can you? Yeah. It's like, imagine you're one of those people who got that $100 game and now it's literally $5 at Ollie's. It's that stuff always stories. Well, I'll tell you what makes me feel stupid is I bought this book for $100, which is now $50 because no one's buying it. Yeah. No one's buying it. It's like the history of D&D book is totally like a flop. So, welcome to the world. Welcome to the world of books. This is why they're getting rid of everything. They're like, digital everything. We don't need to print stuff. Who needs to print anything? So, anyhow, way back to the original point is... What do you think will take to make Daggerheart successful? And will
it's a good question.
Critical Role change to Daggerheart from D&D? Is that a good move, a bad move? It's hard to say.
I would start answering this by saying that, for example, I think Shadowdark has a lot of staying power. Like, there's already such a strong community around that game, which is essentially brand new. It's like a year and a half old, right? Mm-hmm. And it just seems like there's so many third-party creations happening with that. I mean, I'm a little biased because I'm making one of them, but it feels like that has really captured people's attention, and a lot of that had to do with it coming, the Kickstarter happening at the time when a lot of people were like looking for an alternative. But nonetheless, I think that's going to have big staying power. So I feel like something with Daggerheart that kind of coming from an opposite end, where Kelsey was like straight up grassroots, like running it for years at conventions and building up this audience, and then getting the attention of a few people who, became friends, like you mentioned earlier, like her and Runehammer, I know, like helped significantly with that, and kind of like getting her, like turning Kelsey into a publisher in a lot of ways. And not to like diminish obviously anything she's done. Like,
he was
she's
a big
taken
help.
it to a whole other level for sure.
He was a big help.
Yeah. But so Daggerheart now kind of coming top down, where they already have this huge base of an audience who does like to buy things they make. I think a lot of people will buy it. I think it will sell very well, but then will it have staying power as a game that people continue to play? I feel like it could, because even though it's new, so it's kind of untested, whereas like Shadowdark's really rooted in stuff that people are familiar with. I do think the game offers a fresh enough feel that is still familiar enough that it could develop its own audience and stick around for years to come. But I do think it is more of a risk than like Shadowdark was, for example.
Oh yeah, like that's what I said when who was it? Was it Derek that asked Steven and me if they might do the next next game as Daggerheart, and I said kind of what you said, Bob, which is that it's a potential to be very strong for them if they do, because it could cause it to have staying power, but it's also risky. And I don't actually know the mindsets of the people behind it, how much risk aversion versus risk taking they have. Because if they want to do the safe play, the one that is much less likely to accidentally tank their viewership, then they stick with what they've got. Whereas if they're willing to take the risky one that could potentially have a big reward, then I think that they would want to change.
Yeah, when it comes to the campaign on the show, I think it's like my perspective is that they will do something like what they did with Candela, where they have this ongoing, other periodic show. Now, Candela was kind of built for like, their campaigns, quote unquote, I think are like 3 sessions, and then it's like a new series basically. Whereas Daggerheart is built for longer term stuff. I don't think necessarily as long as Critical Role, like 3 years plus for a single campaign. But anyway, I do think they'll just do both. And then the question really is just a matter of like, which one, if not both, will Matthew Mercer DM? Because I feel like that's kind of what most people care about, frankly. Like if we really just to bring it down in simplest terms, it's like whichever game has the majority of the original cast, including Matt Mercer, and they could do it with both somehow. Like, okay, just what if they just ran 2 campaigns every other week? This one's D&D, this one's Daggerheart, and then by the end of the campaign, maybe they like weave it together somehow. Like I could see them doing something like that, but I don't think they would just okay, we're done with D&D and switch their bread and butter campaign to Daggerheart, because for exactly what Steven said earlier, how it's like most people are not just going to abandon one game entirely and switch to something new. I don't think they'll do that either. I think they'll work it in somehow.
I mean, the interesting thing is Candela Obscura was considered a massive failure. It wasn't even just a failure. It was like, no one was watching that. It just... that
was a much bigger risk too, because like we said before, that was the apples to cows comparison, where it's like, okay, here's an entirely different genre, here's a different game master, and like mostly different cast members, entirely different structure for how the show works and how the game works and everything. That was like a big leap away from what their audience was familiar with. So it's pretty much for a different audience.
Whereas you could see you could see if they did a Daggerheart show that had Matt GMing and had a lot of the original people that they still had playing, right? You could see that having more, and it's in a fantasy setting, more of a crossover audience with the main campaign than Candela.
Well, my biggest question is, what is the purpose of Daggerheart? Like, are they doing this because, let's just break this down. They can be doing this because A, they don't want to pay any percentages to WoTC if they have to pay a piece of their revenue to them because they're using D&D officially. So they come up with their own game system, so then they own it. B, they're doing it just for fun, just because they want to do it for the love of the game. C, they're doing it because they actually do want to kind of take on D&D, and they feel like they can do it because they have the power and they have the show and the voice, and maybe they won't ever beat D&D, but they can give them a run for their money. That's really what it comes down to. It's like, why are they doing this? It's like, what is the point of this game? Is it? And I don't know. That's the thing. I don't think I do know. I don't think any of us know exactly. Like, why did they do Daggerheart? And I don't think we're going to know until it comes out and we start seeing the game plan of if Matt Mercer's going to run it. If Matt Mercer runs it and they're not doing D&D anymore, then I think I know the answer. The answer is, okay, That's what they're doing. Like they obviously want to get away from D&D. They're doing their own thing. They're making their own game, and this way they have a clean break. Maybe they stay with D&D and they're just doing it for the love of the game, for fun, and just do their own system because that's something they want to do. Who knows? I think that's the big question that no one's answering.
I think there's usually not one answer to these questions. The bigger an organization is, the more likely that there's even more answers. And obviously, they are not as huge as some of these companies are, but they're relatively bigger than a lot of small indie groups.
I think you underestimate how big they are, Mark, because they have something like...
Okay. How many people do they have compared to Piso?
I think they have like 50. I think they have like 50 people. 50 people on payroll.
Okay. That are doing the RPG.
That are on game. Critical Role.
I'm only talking about the game.
I have no idea what's on the game.
And who would be high enough in the company to be considered to be oversight over the game?
We have no idea. That I have no idea. But I'm talking about Critical Role.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. They're big, but they're not as big as the biggest ones that are there. Yeah. But they're big enough that they're going to have multiple reasons. Even if you have just you and me, Steven, we're two people, and we sometimes have more than two reasons for doing a particular product, because that's just how it can go sometimes. So I don't think that you ever actually, especially when it's a new tabletop RPG, you never get from the maybe we could do that to having completed one, having only one reason to have done it, because otherwise that's not a good enough reason unless that one reason is really dire or pressing.
Yeah. I think the main two, though, like there's definitely part of it is just the sort of insurance policy of like, okay, if we ever need to, we could not ever say the words Dungeons and Dragons again. And for the fact that they wanted to create a game that is just a little closer to the style that like Matt, I guess, wants to run, and like the kinds of games they want to be played. Because like for the same reason that everybody says how their home game was Pathfinder, and then they switched to 5e because they thought it would be a little easier to show on a stream. And so I think Daggerheart's just like a little bit closer of an iteration to the kind of stream game that they want to have. Because another comparison would be like Dimension 20 does like very rules light stuff, it seems, for their shows. I know like one of their original campaigns was 5th edition, and they've probably done a few more. I definitely know less about Dimension 20 than I do about Critical Role, but I know that they've experimented with a lot more systems and even making their own more recently. So
yeah, I don't know. I mean, we'll find out. The thing is that they don't. The amount of money they're making between Critical Role and all their Amazon deals, I mean, they're making millions. It's like they make so much more money on those than they'll ever make on a role-playing game, unless it's a really, really big hit. It's almost not worth the effort. So, I don't know.
Could it be that it is a something like an escape clause for them?
Oh, I guarantee it's an escape clause.
Because maybe they felt like when they were in December 2022, we know that they were one of the groups that was approached by Wizards directly. And then when Wizards put the screws to people on the OGL, right? Mm-hmm. Maybe they never wanted to be in that situation again. Because if Daggerheart is an escape clause, then they can just, if that ever happens again, and right now it doesn't seem like it will, but maybe, Wizards gets new lawyers, new executives who forget the mistakes of the past and are like, why did we never try to do a really mean license? Let's try to do that. And then the next time it happens, they can be like, oh, okay, sure. But, our Amazon show doesn't reference D&D. And we've got Daggerheart, so yeah, that's okay.
You know what? But I bet
not take your deal. We'll just switch to Daggerheart.
Yeah, but I bet you Piso would have been very happy.
Tactic.
If Piso would have been very happy to let them go to Pathfinder, I'll tell you that.
I know that's true from being at Piso. Yes. Everyone at Piso was always super happy that they had even started playing Pathfinder. We gave them a 2nd edition core rulebook to Matt when in the Gen Con when it came out. And Piso is and Pathfinder people are always happy when anybody does it, right? We were talking about Delicious in Dungeon, Bob, before, but like the manga artist in Japan who draws that at one point, like she sketched some Pathfinder characters.
Wow.
And then like everybody at Piso was like, "Oh my gosh, they're sketching Pathfinder characters on." And then they like sent like a response because some people at Piso can speak Japanese and sent a response in Japanese to be like, "Oh my gosh, thanks for sketching these Pathfinder characters." 'Cause it was from one of the Pathfinder video games. I think the mangaka was like, "These look cool, but it's too. I hope they get a Japanese translation for it because it's too much English or something like that."
Well, I'll be very curious to see. The book looked really nice. I'll leave it at that. I was like, the book looked really nice, and we'll see how it goes. But I will tell you, as someone else who's going to be doing a Shadowdark or multiple Shadowdark books, besides you, Bob, we're also doing multiple Shadowdark books. Yeah, Shadowdark is the real deal. Like, I don't have to tell you. Like, I see the writing on the wall. I'm talking to the people behind the scenes. I'm working with the same people who run my games, run the Shadowdark games. Like, Shadowdark is here to stay for quite a while.
Yeah.
It's definitely got amazing staying power, and people freaking love it. And it's almost like picture perfect. It is really well designed. It's like DCC is also very well designed to run at conventions. It's a very convention friendly game. Extremely convention friendly. You don't even know how to play. It's like, you don't need to play, don't worry about it. You know, you can sit down and figure it out while you're playing. You know, it's really not that hard.
It'd be good for streaming too, for the same reason.
It's such a good
just
game.
Grab people, have them play it.
Yeah, it's such a fun. It's so crazy and deadly, and yeah, for streaming it's fun because people like die left and right, and you got like really high stress.
Shadowdark is not even that deadly.
Well, to be fair, I've never died in Shadowdark. I've seen a lot of other people die, but I've never died. So
I played a Shadowdark game where the thief rolled, I think, 2 hit points, and we were also like, the GM was running an adventure for like 5th or 6th level characters when we were.
Then you had a bad GM because I played a game.
And the thief, I know, I assumed that the thief was gonna die like immediately.
Oh, I saw a level 1 monster do 17 points of damage in 1 hit. So, and then you're just dead. So,
I was very shocked that the thief survived. Although, to be fair, my cleric took an entire spell loadout that was focused around giving the enemies disadvantage on attacking so that they wouldn't kill the thief in 1 hit.
It could be luck, man. It could be luck. I mean, I played a couple games. Let's see. I mean, we played with Kelsey. I don't think anyone died when we played with Kelsey. I played with Derek, and half of the party died, and I got to level 4 in 1 session while everyone else was dying. Well, I kept finding because he had the gem, gold equals experience, and I kept finding the gold because they didn't know where to go. So they didn't know what to do. They didn't know. It was all old school stuff. That was the difference. Is that if you're old school, it was easy. That's the one thing. Actually, now I'm thinking about it. If you're old school, you were living, and if you were new school, you were dying. I think that's the. I think that was the secret. At least the games I've been playing. Is that maybe that they just don't know the old school tricks and they're falling for them for the first time.
I mean, when I started my TCC campaign at home, I told my players all up front, like, you have to just be a little cautious. Like, think about it, like, approach everything like you're investigating a little bit. You know, don't assume that you can just like kill stuff or even assume that things necessarily want to fight you. Like, be more open to like bargaining and just stealth and stuff. And they've all survived so far. Like, outside of our funnel session, of course, where a couple level 0s died. So far, we've had the same characters for 9 sessions now.
Wow.
And they're level 2, and just by level 2. Even our warrior has like 20 plus hit points just because they got good rolls on their hit die. So
I do want to play with Grace World Destroyer because she tell the story where she played a funnel and she came out with more characters than she went in with.
That's amazing.
Yeah, that's just kind of classic Grace, I guess. Is she'll, especially in like a one-shot kind of scenario, so like whereas the funnel is, it's part of the campaign, but it's kind of standalone at the same time. She'll always do something unexpected, and so not only did her 4 that she started with survive, but she recruited 2 of the like what's the word I'm looking for? Almost like subhuman sort of monsters that like think of like Gollum in Lord of the Rings, kind of two guys like that, where they were fighting like a horde of these dudes.
Situations.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so she recruited two of those, and they ended up just basically being prisoners. And then her character, like in the very next session at level 1, then she had them fight each other to the death.
No.
But, yeah,
So she went in with 4 and left with 6.
exactly.
And then I can just see them in DCC being like, "This is not what funnels are supposed to be."
Well, that's what it just gives you more characters to play with. I mean,
Yeah, and I'm seeing in chat here, Elder Goblin Games says, I hear she also canonized a few Elder Gods in Shadowdark, and that comes from a one shot that I ran for my group, a Shadowdark one shot that I ran for them probably a year ago, where there was a focus on the lost, which anyone, if you're familiar with the deities of Shadowdark, 2 of them are just like lost to history. No one knows their names, whatever. And I just had some like kind of throwaway like riddle, basically something about a forgotten god, and she just kind of like went off and like made up some goofy names for the 2 lost gods, and then texted Kelsey and was like, or maybe it was Discord, whatever, was like, hey, can these be the names for the lost? And Kelsey was like, yes, that's it now.
That's not fair.
I mean, it'll definitely never end up in a book. One of them was literally like Benjamin or something. So yeah.
You never know. If you can have like a time and space traveling chicken, you can have Benjamin the Lost.
It's who knows?
Maybe he had his name become Lost because it was Benjamin, and he was kind of embarrassed. So he
wanted it to be forgotten to time.
Created a ritual that caused his name to be forgotten, so that no one would be able to remember that it was Benjamin.
Yeah.
Well,
sorry to all you Benjamins watching this. This is not about humans.
No hate on the
only
Benjamins.
about elder deities named Benjamin.
Yep.
Well, I'm trying to think what I'm gonna. I mean, my guy in my home game, they just turned level 19 in Pathfinder. Do you have to take a feat mark to take the level 10 spell? Like, you don't get it automatically.
At level 19 you get 1.
Okay.
And at level 20 you can take a feat and get a second level 10
That's
spell.
what I thought, because he said he was using Path Builder, or no, he was using Hero Lab, and he wasn't getting a level 10 spell.
Well, who knows what Hero Lab is
Well,
doing,
that's what I was saying.
David.
Like, you should get a level 10 spell, and he was like, no, he wasn't getting it. He's a cleric, so I'll take a look at it.
Yeah, he's a cleric. He would get rank 10 spell, so he can be doing all sorts of outrageous and unfair things.
It's the straightest. We have a race to see if they can finish. He has a race to see if he can finish his next level character before the session ends, because it's always at the end of the night. He got his level 19 character done in like 2 minutes. And then the thief behind him got him done in 3 minutes. And then the other 2 players, they always get their characters done 3 minutes before the session starts. So they're the opposite end. They're the worst. They get theirs done. Like, oh, we're playing, hold on, let me finish on my character. Like, during the session when they're all level 19. So I was like, all right. But I have to decide what to play next, because we're about to actually... That's not true. I already know we're playing next. We're going to be doing Jewel the Indigo Isle, Mark. So.
Oh, Jewel the Indigo Isle.
Yeah. I get to finally run my own adventure path. So
it'll be great. I'm running it for my group. They just can't meet most of the weeks, and it's been pretty fun so far.
What are they up to? What level are they?
They are going into the cave. So what level is that?
3.
3. That's what I thought. They just hit level 3 recently.
Okay.
And but we haven't been able to actually muster a session in like a month or 2. But they are going to be going to the cave soon.
Now I'm going to have them go. And the thing is that it's so much based on... Oh, my camera's moving with me. Look at that. Whoa. Wherever I go, the camera goes.
Steven, stop it.
Am I getting you sick? It's like I'm on a ride. Woo!
Don't watch, everyone. Don't watch it.
It's based on movies so much that people are gonna. My guys love it. Like, they all love movies, so
I think they're gonna like it.
Oh, they're gonna
love it. In mine, it's very popular. The Eldamon trainer is just having Linda is playing is just being hilarious. Not only for catching Eldamon, but because she has comedically terrible dexterity and associated reflex saving throws. And so therefore, every time that you can fall into a hole or have anything bad happen like that, it happens to her character. And so everyone just,
There we go.
it's like happened like 5 or 6 times. So everyone just cracks up that her character is just going to fall off of something or fall into a hole like every session now.
I do want to play DCC with you. Maybe I'll put together a game. There's actually a lot of downtime at Page, Bob. So, do you want to play Thursday night? We're playing DC 20. If you want to play with us.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I still need to, honestly, I need to decide what days I'm going. Because like I said, I didn't get a hotel for it yet. I don't know if I want to get a hotel or if I'm just going to
the hotel's
drive
real
back
cheap.
and forth for like 2 of them or something. So
well, I would recommend
I'll look into
this. This is what I recommend. So Thursday night is the dinner.
Right.
And then we're playing DC 20. If you want to play with us, with the guys over at Avenue. With Avenue Studios. So we're gonna play with this. Yeah, they're on there right now. So we need some more players. And so I'd probably get a night at least Thursday to Friday. After that, if you want to leave, Saturday and drive back Sunday or something. The hotel is super cheap though, and there's a link to get the rate.
It actually must be, right? Because it's like, I was just thinking how with PAX, like all the hotels were double their normal price when I was looking at it. It's so frustrating how they just do that. But yeah, I imagine this convention is still kind of small enough that it's not influencing the pricing.
I mean, I was getting, we have a special rate and everyone's staying in the same hotel. It's like $150 a night, which, so it's pretty reasonable.
Bad.
Yeah. And everyone's there. That's the other thing. Like everyone's at the hotel. So,
right. So yeah, that would be a fun time to play some DCC. I could probably put something together.
Or if you put something together, even more so.
Right.
I would love, we could play some DCC. There's going to literally be everyone there. It will be pretty easy to put together a game. I think it's going to be like Gen Con. It'll be like...
I just need to plan a game, because I always, even if it's a one-shot, I always really overthink my prep for it.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, especially when I got some some GMs I look up to in different ways at my table. I want to impress. But
interesting.
Yeah.
I've gone the other way. I used to super over prep to I am the Mark Seifter method of prepping, where I write down on a Post-it note one sentence, and I'll be like, "That's it. I'll figure out the rest."
It's kind of where I'm at for my home campaign now. But yeah. Anyway.
Yeah, I mean, it just depends on your style, and anything can work well. For me, I actually get a lot more nervous especially if it's like a televised game of Pathfinder playing than running. I'm totally happy to run the game if people are watching, but if I'm playing, I get very, very nervous because of the fact that people generally, like, I don't want to interrupt when somebody gets the rules wrong.
Sure.
But also, people have sometimes been like, well, Mark Seifter was sitting there and he didn't say anything, and they did it this way. That is like,
a lot of pressure.
It didn't cause any problems at that table, but is super wrong overall and potentially broken if you do it that way. Let's say.
I do.
They're like, but this must be right? Otherwise, they would have said that. It's like, no, I'm trying not to be a jerk at somebody else's table, so I'm just not gonna say anything. I'll tell them at the end after it's over so that they know.
I never correct unless it's vastly wrong, and I'll say that. I'm like, if they're vastly wrong, like, I don't know, like if you, two people are standing across from each other,
but
like,
Steven, they don't then create like social media threads afterward that said Steven Glicker played in this game as a player, and he didn't say anything, and so therefore this must be right. That's the issue. I don't like.
You start off with the caveat that I am not going to rules lawyer anything, and everything is considered homeschool. Therefore, whatever you play is accurate. Therefore,
I've started doing that because I have done.
That's a good policy then.
And I say at the beginning, I just like, listen, I am specifically not going to say anything if some of the rules are off, so that we can just keep going. So do not assume that my lack of statements to the contrary indicates that any particular ruling that was made during this show is correct.
Yeah, actually, this is reminding me. I was just PAX, I was talking to Phil from Page. I think we were all sitting together, Steven.
Yeah,
This is before we went out to the restaurant though.
Yeah.
And he was saying that he played in a session at a different convention. I can't remember which con it was, but with Chris Perkins of, Wizards of the Coast.
Yeah.
And he was like asking about how something worked and like in 2024, because they were I think they were playing with the 2014 rules, but he was like, oh, how would this work in 2024 because of this other new thing? And Chris Perkins was like, I don't know.
Oh yeah, I played D&D. I played with Chris. I played D&D with James Wyatt.
Okay.
Who is like the god of D&D. And not only, oh God, Mark, you would love this, because sometimes I'm known as the world destroyer. Talk about I'm the game destroyer. I'm not a world. I'm the game destroyer. And we're in the. Sometimes I'm in the mood to game destroy. Sometimes I'm not. We were all in the mood to game destroy, and boy, did we game destroy. But man, that's when you know you have a really, really, really good GM, because we were in a fight and we basically gave up. So he took us and threw us in jail. And then everything after that was completely made up, because he's like, that's not what's supposed to happen. You're not supposed to lose the fight. And then it just got goofy off the rails, and the rules were all over the place. But who cares? It was just like, even he was like, I don't know what we're doing, because you guys like are totally breaking this game in every way possible. But the funny thing is, he was loving it. He loved every aspect of it, because I think he was finally getting to go off the rails and do fun stuff that he never gets to do. Because it was like something at Gen Con, and it was like a pre-made campaign or something like he was running for multiple people, and then we're like, the old, it's funny because you always hear about that, how it's like, oh yeah, don't go off the rail. What's over there? What's in that forest? It's like, oh, there's a forest over there. Oh, we're going to the forest. It's like, you're not supposed to go in the forest. It's just there. It's like, oh no, we're going in. And it's like, no, but we didn't prepare anything. That's us. That was the whole session of us. It's like, what did you not prepare? Okay, that's where we're going. It's like, no.
Yep. Yeah, but I have a good story for this. I know we're running a little late, but I'll mention just in the last session I ran, one of my players. So they're in the sewers of this city, like the one kind of like city in my setting, and one of my characters is playing an elf in DCC. And so savvy listeners will know that elves in DCC, it literally says in the book, are entitled to a check if there are any secret doors nearby to find them. And so he asked me, he's like, oh, are we passing any hidden doors while we're walking through the sewers here? So I was like, okay, huh. So I just take out my new favorite dice, which is a die that just is a 6-sider. 3 of the sides say yes, 3 of the sides say no. And I rolled it, and it was a yes. So I was like, okay, there's a secret door here. Let's find out where this goes. And then I rolled for a random shop in the city. And then it was, just kind of describing like what basement they were walking into. And it was just like the back room of essentially like the post office. And then they basically pulled some shenanigans with one of their familiars and a spell. And like stole some packages and ran off with this mail theft. So that was like probably ended up being like a good half an hour, maybe more of our session was just completely improvised. Like there was not supposed to be a secret door here, but whatever. That's just kind of where it led.
The post office is maybe, especially for foreign countries or something, one of the best places that you could get a secret door into. But maybe the most likely that the door was built by an intelligence agency, because a lot of like early, like in those medieval times, agencies would have started by like being a part of the postal system and like looking at people's mail or things like that.
Totally. Yeah, I was very happy with that result. So it's definitely like that door exists now. And they're one of the few people who knows where it is.
Speaking of which, I had something interesting happen to me, and then we'll wrap things up. I actually have to go. I got my proofs. By the way, I could show you how that works. These are my proofs for fairy dragons.
Ooh, fairy dragons! I can tell from the alicorn.
Yeah, so these are
the stylized alicorn.
Yeah, these are the proofs for the book, and the package was from FedEx from China, torn open with big green tape that basically said it was inspected, and I was like, "What?" what? I mean, I know they did it, but I've never actually had that happen. And it was like torn open, resealed, but then went inside, they wrap this. Like, I want to tell you, these things from China, like I have to bring out like the buzzsaw. It is so hard to get this thing open because they wrap it in like 100 layers. They opened up the box and unwrapped everything to see what was in there. And I know they do this randomly, to do, they do random checks all the time. But then it was all resealed, and I was like, oh my God. And that was like, they resealed it and put it back. I think everything was still in there. I think it was, but yeah, they still do that sort of stuff. So,
some people at some of those agencies are gamers. Like I've had a decent number of TSA people recognize game stuff when they if you have enough dice, they will almost always check because it looks like a plastic explosive or something. And then I've seen them recognize like different game books, even ones that were like more obscure than your most basic D&D books before. So it would be funny if any of them were like, "Wow, that's the latest Roll for Combat book. I get to see it in advance because we inspected that." That would have been funny.
Yeah, that was a little weird. It was a little like it came with like the tape on it and it literally said like inspected. And I was like, whoa. It's like, what is this? Like, So they also do that because if you ship something as a certain type of item for customs and stuff, you have to declare it different ways under different numbers. And so they will check randomly to make sure. If not, you get a massive fine. You don't want to know how big that fine can be. So this was just paper, so there's no tariffs or anything.
Is the fine $10,000 for if your dragon book had been not a book, but instead like something?
No, this was just paper.
Different?
This was just paper. There was
so
like
your dragon sheets of paper. If they had been like plastic instead of paper.
No. I know where you're getting at, but no, this was just a FedEx package. But I had to airlift 500 books from China. And that had to go through tariffs. That had to go through the process and everything. So even though it's airlifted, it was because it was, I won't get into it. That's a whole other topic of some other time we'll get into. But anyhow, yes, there, post office. That's where we're getting back to, post office. So, and by the way, I feel very bad for anyone who lives in Canada. I did not realize this. The Canadian Post has been on strike because every single day I get someone asking me where their books are. And I keep saying, I can't help you. Canada's post office has been on strike for a month, and I have no idea. It's just because it's just sitting at the. I guess it's just sitting there. And can you imagine during the holidays how much mail? Like, how are they ever going to catch up on that mail? Like, some people have been getting.
On the
mail
other end, it's a good. Like for leverage perspective, it's a good time for them to try to get their leverage because they're needed the most during the holidays time, right?
Yeah, but also Canadian Post is like one of the cheapest. It's so cheap. Like the postage in Canada is like dirt.
Well, maybe that's part of the problem. Maybe it's dirt cheap because the conditions for the post are not good. I don't know. I literally don't know very much.
I don't know nothing
Canadian
except
Post.
every day I get
have
emails asking me where their stuff is, and I say Canada, and they go, "Oh, okay." I'm like, I can't control it. I have no control over Canada. Sorry. Yeah, well, it'll hopefully get settled soon. But my only thing is, how will they ever catch up? Because it's like a month of mail. Can you imagine? Like you're gonna get like a box. Everyone's gonna get a box like this big of all their mail. I go away for a week, and they give me a crate of mail. And I'm like, a month of mail? That's got to be atrocious. So, anyhow. All right. Well, thanks, Bob, for joining us. We didn't even talk about everything. I didn't even say what I was doing. We barely talked about it. So
this was just such an interesting topic that it took up the whole time, and without covering everything you did at the show.
Yeah, that's what you get when you get the official Daggerheart correspondent on. So
he's really leading into that. Well, wait till we get it, and then I'm gonna have Bob
have Bob on for.
I'm gonna make Bob force to play. I'm gonna make him play or DM us on Daggerheart.
Yeah, that is my problem though. It's I'm definitely one of the people who gets the game book, but then doesn't play it for several months until
Several
after.
months?
Me
So,
too.
I never
We'll see how
play
it
it.
goes.
I get the game book and I never play. Well, because my players won't do it. I'm like, let's try this. They're like, we're good. I'm like,
Right.
come
Do
Do you
on,
know
let's
how
try.
many of those
Nah.
books behind Steven on the wall he's actually played, including the ones that have his company
I think
logo on
that's-
them? Very
That
few.
sounds like it needs a whole other 2 hours to go through. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
so let's not.
It's easy.
All right.
All of them.
There you go.
Yeah, all of it.
No,
Well,
not the Pathfinder core rulebook. You did play that.
no, I played Shadowdark. I played.
Yeah, so you've played a
I
few.
played a few of these, but the problem is
Okay.
that someone else has to run it. I'm too
Yeah.
lazy to learn the new rules. The good news is, whenever we see Derek
I'll run for you,
Melinda,
Steven.
Derek runs everything for me. So whenever I see Derek, he's like, I'm going to run 3 new games. And I'm like, yay. And then I play new games because Derek runs
If you
everything.
want to have us running new games be on this channel, I will do it.
I don't
So just let me
time.
know, Steven.
You're too
But
busy.
until-
I'm not giving you time away from writing.
No, you're right. There's too much that needs to be done.
Yes.
I already know that doing the Reddit AMA for the Year of Titans tomorrow, I could have been writing, but it's going to be fun. All right, everyone. Until next time, if you want to battle the zoo, you have to roll for combat.
Bye.
Bye.